Heather, that was a very powerful and illuminating set of remarks, and I think we have a lot of questions. I'd like to begin with a few questions, if you don't mind. Firstly, to thank you for, I think, the frankness, but also the way that you've framed all of that, and I think bringing together, of course, both of your roles as CEO of the ACIC, but also as Director of the Australian Institute of Criminology. I'd love to go to the content of your speech first, but I also want to move towards the end of our conversation to talk a little bit about your ambitions and the role, the questions of leadership and legacy. But let's begin, if you don't mind, with the role. Now, in true sort of tradition of procedure, I've got my very small notebook here. So, look, firstly, I'd like to ask a little bit about, I guess, how you see the connection of all of these risks that we're talking about. And I appreciated the way that you framed this somewhat in a national security context. It's not narrowly or purely about national security, but the impacts of serious and organised crime, the costs of it on the community, and the way in which so many of the, I guess, very disturbing data points that you shared actually connect with the other risks that we face, whether it's to do with community cohesion, whether it's to do with foreign interference, whether it's to do with, I guess, community uncertainty about the future. So that's a long way, really, of asking you for your, I guess, elaboration of the national security dimension of the challenges that you've outlined, please.
Thanks very much, Rory. And again, thank you again for hosting me here this evening. I think you're right. Transnational serious organised crime hasn't always been seen as a national security issue. But I think, again, not least of all based on some of the things discussed today, it has fallen into that definition for some time. And I think, when we look at anything that reduces our resilience as a nation, when we look at things that, start to hit our bottom line and our economic prosperity, when we look at things that disrupt and violate our border integrity, when we look at the harm that is caused to our citizens and the fear that can create in our communities, and the social disruption and the impact on social cohesion, I think combined, this all makes it part and parcel of the many threats that we're facing now as a country. And I think we've spoken a lot about that convergence of threats. I mean, my colleagues Mike Burgess and Chrissy Barrett have spoken about it, and the Minister of Home Affairs certainly spoke about it recently at his National Press Club address. But it is this convergence of threats that creates that overall harm and threat to national security. And transnational and serious organised crime, the scale of it and the sophistication of it, means that it falls right into that category too.
So in response to that, I think you again sort of moved in this direction in your remarks, the empowering of the community, the awareness of the community to play their part. Like so many of the national security issues and the issues related to national resilience that we deal with here at the college, we are thinking more and more about the rights, but also the responsibilities of the broader community and the opportunities for the broader community, including the business community, including civil society, including other institutions, to contribute to whole-of-nation response. We're only as great as the sum of our parts. So I'm interested in any reflections on, I guess, partly how you, intend your speech and your remarks and these reports to animate the broader community in understanding their opportunities, their responsibilities.
Yeah, I mean, that's precisely the reason for it. And I think it's probably why we're seeing many agencies that traditionally were a lot more behind the scenes coming out and talking about the threat in a very real way. It was also a recommendation out of the ACIC review that recognized people didn't have a good appreciation of serious organized crime, the threat it posed, and why it mattered. So I think, that's obviously the driver in doing that is to raise awareness, shine a light on an issue, but ultimately to allow people to be informed about how best to protect themselves, whether that's in the cyber realm, whether that's in their own neighborhoods, whether that's around whether or not to buy, illegal cigarettes. We want people to be informed. It's necessary for them to be informed in order to help protect themselves. And I think that's very important for the business sector as well. When we talk about industry, again, I don't think enough has been done in terms of engagement to help share the risk and explain in a bit more detail about how transnational and serious organized crime syndicates are targeting sectors of industry. There might be some awareness, but really to support them in managing that risk, which allows us to manage the collective risk, they need more information. And we have more information. And I think the onus is on us to find a way of sharing that in a way that allows them to act, manage risk, and take action.
So, I guess this is the start of a longer engagement or a longer conversation with the community, because I guess just reflecting on that, I'm thinking, there will be citizens and there will be institutions and individuals and probably players in the private sector and others out there who'll say, we're vaguely aware of this challenge and the scale of it, but what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
And flipping that around, I think the point you made, including, for example, on illicit drugs, and you mentioned, illegal cigarettes as well there. I mean, presumably there are parts of the community who will say, well, we may touch the edge of this problem, but what we do doesn't really matter that much. We're not really contributing to the problem. How do you respond to that?
Well, again, I think it's drawing these threads through what might be invisible to them, but how it is actually impacting them. Whether it is about the safety of their neighborhood, whether it is about the security of their business, whether it is about family members who may be impacted by some of these harmful substances that are circulating right now. But I think we just have to keep talking about it and keep shining a light on it and helping them make it better informed judgments about some of these things. I mean, I think the illicit drug problem is profound, and we're increasingly concerned not just about the drugs we see circulating more regularly in the large volumes that I mentioned, but some of the very dangerous things like synthetic opioids that are emerging in our system. These are things that are laced in other products, unbeknownst to the individuals who are purchasing them, and are absolutely deadly. And there have been a series of unfortunate deaths over the past year or so as a result of some of these things, like nitazines, for instance. We're lucky we don't have the fentanyl problem, but there are increasingly more dangerous substances that are emerging. We need to be talking about that to young people. We need to be talking that about parents in order for them to take precautions. And I think the same thing is true in this online space, where we know young people are so incredibly vulnerable. We just need to keep shining a light on that harmful activity, about the threats that exist out there, with a view to helping parents and young people make better decisions.
So the cost is so much more than financial. And although having said all that, I was struck by the financial scale. I mean, the fact that I think it's sort of more 1.5 times the Australian defence budget. Effectively, we're losing every year to serious and organised crime, even just at that level. The role of subnational government, states and territories in particular, in working with the Commonwealth, because this isn't just a set of challenges that the Commonwealth government can face alone. How's that going, and how are the contributions or the roles evolving of states, territories and the Commonwealth with transnational serious and organised crime?
States and territories are very, very heavy lifters in this space, as they are across a lot of these national security issues and criminal matters. The relationships are critically important. The coordination, the taking strategic approach to how we tackle these problems is very, very important. I think what we're fortunate with here in Australia is that we have very well-established, well-oiled mechanisms. We're not so big that we can't coordinate and manage across these different challenges. I think the partnerships between Commonwealth agencies, whether in the intelligence community, whether it's our law enforcement partners, our border enforcement agencies, and our state and territory counterparts, are incredibly strong, very well joined up. And not transactional. We work in very integrated ways with huge trust, enormous sharing of information and data and intelligence, and very coordinated and collaborative ways of tackling the problem and disrupting it. So I think we are in a very good place, but there is always a lot more to do. I think one of the challenges with serious and organized crime, and my remarks probably pointed to this, is that it is vast. It's real world, it's virtual, it's onshore, it's offshore. Being able to get upstream, being able to get offshore, being able to get online, those are the strategies we need to be employing. You can cut the head off the snake and it doesn't necessarily make the snake die. We really need to be tackling the business model and really need to be taking the profit out of this for serious organized crime and creating a much more difficult operating environment for them. And that takes all states and territories and all our Commonwealth effort to be able to do that effectively, and our very important overseas partners as well.
You talked, so I'm going to sort of draw out one or two threads of your remarks and sort of try to turn them around a little bit, because you talked, for example, about the way technology is being exploited by criminal organisations. You talked, and we'll perhaps come to the online piece a little bit further in a moment, but you talked about how so many new and disruptive technologies are being used to their advantage. I'm interested in understanding whether it works both ways. I mean, to what extent is technological change working for the Commission and perhaps for the broader law enforcement and sort of criminal intelligence community? Is AI your friend, for example, or could it be?
Yeah. Listen, AI is a friend, with caution, of course. But we can't ignore the benefits of AI, particularly in the intelligence business, which is a big data, big information exercise now. So, being able to make sense of data, find needles in the haystack, reach decisions much quicker than we have before. You can't operate without embracing all of that modern technology. I think where we're at a disadvantage is, of course, criminal enterprises have no rules, have no constraints, have unlimited money in many ways, like huge resources to be able to adopt and pay for these sorts of things. But we are constrained, and necessarily, by privacy, by making sure that we've got human eyes on critical decisions that impact people. So we need to embrace the technology. We need to do it quickly, and we need to be sharing capability, which does happen very effectively and has for many years. But we need all of our efforts to try and stay ahead of how quickly criminal enterprises are able to adopt and use technologies.
I want to come to people at the end, but let's pause that capability piece there for a moment. So a couple of more questions, if you don't mind, Heather, and then I'm going to open up to the group. So if you have questions that you would like to put to Heather Cook, please begin to frame them in your mind. We have microphones that will come to you a little later on. But look, let's look at your speech in the context of this season of speeches that we seem to be having at the moment. Speeches and statements, and I've mentioned already, and we've already mentioned the AFP Commissioner, the Director General of ASIO. There've also been, I think, some really important remarks made, as you said, by the Minister for Home Affairs. There were even some observations about the international strategic environment from the DG of ONI at a Japan-related event recently. There does seem to be a greater national conversation developing about the interconnected challenges that we face. And I think in terms of your work, your role, and particularly the remarks we've heard from the AFP and ASIO, there are some common themes that I'd like to touch on. So, the question of obviously the online vectors of threat, the grooming of young people are very disturbing as perpetrators and as victims, or as victims or both. Violence and the violence that is being seen on Australian streets and Australian society, again, whether it's criminal, whether there's a political edge to some of it. So if it's all joined up, how are you seeing the national security community or the law enforcement and intelligence community's dynamic of working together particularly in the federal system? How's that going?
Listen, I think it's highly effective. I think we are very, very well served and very lucky to have the arrangements that we do have. The national intelligence community and the broader national security community is a very close-knit, group of agencies, and we have incredibly well-established arrangements for working together in that collaborative way. Again, when we all have our individual mandates, we all have our own responsibilities. But when you do see these threads, like the ones you just described, this online problem that we have with young people, both in terms of violent extremism, but obviously as well as in this criminal sense, we can come together. We can talk about these issues and share capability and insights with a view to helping solve these problems. They're very, very, very challenging. I think it's why we need this multi-pronged approach. Intelligence agencies and enforcement agencies will be working very hard to identify the perpetrators and the individuals who are online and doing, engaging in this nefarious behavior and targeting young people and doing this, engaging in this harmful conduct. But we need to be talking about it openly in the way we have been in recent times, so that individuals can protect themselves. Parents need to be aware of the hazards out there. I'm talking to parents all the time, and I'm astounded by how naive they are about what their children may or may not be doing online. So, I think we just can't talk about this enough, and we need elements of our policy agencies. We need social policy, we need education, we need health policy that is backing this in and helping to work in that preventative space. Because quite frankly, when it gets to organizations like mine or the AFP or ASIO, that's the very pointy end of bad. We need to do more in that preventative space to stop it from getting there to begin with.
Look, before I go to the audience for their questions, I want to turn a little bit to, I guess, leadership and your organisation and your own leadership now, and the legacy that you aim to build. I guess what motivates you, if you don't mind me asking, so whether it's a little bit about your own leadership story, and again, thank you for the work you've done with the college in that regard, but what do you aim to achieve and in time leave with the organisation?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think if you talk to anybody who works in the national security space, and you will have spoken to many people, we've got lots of members here, you're driven by the mission, you're driven by the passion for protecting this country and its people. It's wonderful to have workforces full of people with that passion and that commitment, because you can do great things when you're connected by that common driver. These are the things that draw me to the national security community. It's the thing that drew me out of retirement, the opportunity to lead an organization dealing with and handling a very horrible problem for the country. What I want to do is to make sure that the ACIC is a valuable partner to its many stakeholders and agencies. I want to make sure that we are giving effect to the very, very useful review that the government commissioned last year that provides the ACIC with a very, very clear mandate. We have been, as an organization for many years, straddling law enforcement and intelligence with a piece of legislation that really didn't allow us to do either one as effectively as we needed to. We already have 9 highly effective law enforcement organizations. The opportunity to build a fit-for-purpose criminal intelligence organization focused on transnational and serious organized crime is a really terrific opportunity, a real privilege for a leader to do. So, what I'm looking to do, or what I hope will be in place by the time I leave the role after my 5-year term, if I last that long, is a high-performing criminal intelligence organization with fit-for-purpose legislation, fit-for-purpose capability, working seamlessly with its many partners.
And of course, leadership is about the team as well. So, what's your perception of what motivates your your team, your people, and perhaps given the really confronting nature of some of the issues that we're dealing with here, what motivates them when they're perhaps challenged or overwhelmed by the work they're doing?
Yeah, listen, that happens a lot. I mean, it's hard not to be overwhelmed by the volume and scale of this issue, but I am constantly impressed with the resilience, the energy, the persistence of people in the ACIC, and I see it across the community in many organizations. There's something that drives people who are connected to that mission of serving their country and protecting it. That allows you to surpass being tired, being frustrated, not having enough resources, not having perhaps the capability you need, but keeps you coming back and keeps you fighting the good fight. And I see that in spades in my organization, and that gets me up in the morning. That makes me feel safe at night as well. And I'm delighted for the opportunity to be able to work with these incredibly professional people, both in the ACIC and the Australian Institute of Criminology.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's go to the room for a few questions, and I'll take a few. I'll take maybe 3 questions. So if you've got questions or perhaps an observation and a question, will come to you, and I'll start here. And I think I know who you are, but I'm not sure if everyone knows my colleagues. So please introduce yourself.
Hi there, Heather. Danielle Ellen Piper from the National Security College. I'm one of the academics here. I appreciate that the mandate of the ACIC is essentially Australian, but of course serious organised crime is inherently transnational. And I wonder to what extent your mandate is transnational, and to what are the challenges and opportunities about cross-border cooperation, international crime cooperation in the work that you're doing?
Thank you, Danielle. It's the ACIC does operate transnationally. We certainly have representation overseas. We have many partnerships and arrangements with overseas partners. There's no way to do the job without that, especially these days. I think 70% of, the major syndicates targeting Australia have their heads or some base offshore somewhere. So you can't fight this without being involved with those partners. And that's both traditional and perhaps some non-traditional partners as well. So it simply is a part of the business, and it has been for many, many years. And our capability and our legislation allows us to operate that way. But I do want to call out our many overseas partners who are terrific partners in this fight.
Building on the international dimension, interested also in, I guess, international best practice. I mean, are there lessons Australia can learn from others?
Well, there always are lessons to be learned. I think Australia certainly holds its own and has a lot of good practice examples as well. But we're always working together. I mean, we talk about the Five Eyes arrangements, but there are many broader partnerships as well. A lot of those conversations just aren't about joint operational work or sharing intelligence. They are about talking about how do we tackle this problem collectively, and sharing best practice and what works. And a lot of that also goes to very deep capability sharing arrangements as well. So the trust that builds is critically important. But I don't think we simply cannot fight this fight on any front if we weren't building those trusting relationships, looking for best practice wherever we could find it, and sharing it when we think we have it ourselves.
And this is global rather than just regional. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Other questions? I will come back to you, Danielle, if I have another moment's silence. Why don't you take it away?
Instances of modern slavery and the number of persons living in modern slavery is increasing globally. I appreciate that Australia is down the scale on modern slavery, and of course modern slavery is an umbrella term for a number of transnational organised crimes. Are you seeing an increase in the Australian context at all, or much intersection between serious organised crime and use of modern slavery?
It's a very good question. I'd love to throw to my AIC colleagues in the room on that. But listen, there is connection. There are connections. There's issues that we're concerned about in terms of people trafficking, and of course, think about the child exploitation space as well, which is horrendous. I think we always look for where we see serious and organized crime having a footprint. I don't know if I would say we're seeing it increasing, but I think the point I would make is what I said in my speech, is that where there is money to be made, you will find serious and organized crime. And where whether that involves exploiting people, whether that involves working in the illicit drug trade or illicit tobacco, it's almost commodity agnostic, and that's how modern organized criminal syndicates are approaching the business, and that's another reason why it makes it very, very difficult. But where you see this sort of ability to, depending on the demand, they will be prepared to supply. So that synergy and that connection is present, including in the space of modern slavery and human trafficking.
Oh, this is the hot corner. Okay,
this is the place to be.
Please introduce yourself as well. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Meg Tapia. I think I'm building on your question. You touched in your remarks on criminal syndicates collaborating.
Mm.
I think of criminal syndicates as siloed, and I think of turf wars. So I'm wondering if you can comment on what might be driving that.
You're quite right. I mean, it used to be very, those familial lines, you'd have very clear lines between gangs or families. But we're seeing far more collaboration. And I think what it is when it makes financial sense for them to do so, they will do it. If it doesn't, they will fight and compete. So if it's about market share, you will see the wars and you will see the violence that we're seeing playing out on the streets. But where it makes financial sense for them to do so, we're seeing far more collaboration. And I think, because these are very sophisticated business-like enterprises, the logistics required to move large quantities of commodity, whatever that might be, we see sharing of sometimes those those sort of supply chain or logistics arrangements for payment. It's crime as a service, and of course, money laundering is another business offering that you can see multiple syndicates perhaps using, similar sort of arrangements. So I think it's just good business sense for them that they will collaborate and share where it makes sense and where they can make money, but you will still see that turf war competition happening when they're vying for market supremacy.
Thank you. We've got a question at the back.
Good evening, Heather. Angus Smith, Research Assistant at the National Security College, also a student at the ANU, so ticking off that student part.
Thank you, Angus.
You've mentioned before around kind of transnational crime, so on, about the states doing some really heavy lifting. I was just curious how you see the convergence of these threats being mitigated through the states and territories. How are you working with your state and territory counterparts to kind of tackle these issues, and are they seeing the same things at a state level that you are at a national level?
Yeah, the answer is definitely. We see these criminal networks active across a variety of different jurisdictions. Sometimes it's more isolated and contained, but more and more we're seeing these this sort of cross jurisdictional networks. And again, the big factor is that overseas connection. Obviously, that impacts wherever the commodity is being moved, or wherever the syndicate is operating. Those international connections are very important. And I think the Commonwealth is in a very good position to be able to help unpick and provide some visibility and assist with that. I mean, the degree to which we can stop crime offshore, stop product from making its way in, affect, support or influence arrests or prosecutions overseas, the less that, we see coming onshore and the fewer problems we have. But there are joint organized crime task forces in every jurisdiction. There are a multitude of task forces, that many of which have been announced recently, including one being led by the Border Force National Disruption Group. That's a Commonwealth entity, but there are a variety of state and Commonwealth integrated units that work collaboratively every day in this area of transnational serious organized crime. So, you can't separate. You really can't separate it. It has to be a natural effort. And that's just for the enforcement part. There is a lot of work that goes on looking at and sharing best practice around regulation and legislation. And you'll see a lot in the news, like various jurisdictions are hardening their environment through stronger regulation, stronger legislation. Those things are discussed, talked about, and end up best practice, ultimately sometimes ends up being seen, spread more widely and nationally. But it just has to be seamless. There's no way of tackling this in isolation.
Thank you.
We can take one more if that's okay. I think there is. I saw vaguely another student hand over that side of the room. So please. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your remarks tonight, Heather. And my name is James Damjanovic. I'm a student also at the ANU. Thanks for breaking the ice, Angus.
Please speak up, James.
No problem. So I think building on, in terms of the perspective of it being a national response and the need to inspire everyone, not just in government, in law enforcement, but also within communities to address the problems that we're talking about tonight. I see persistently, as a young person myself, the fatigue for bad news that people have, the sort of pressures that a lot of people are engaging with in society at the moment, whether it's economic, social, political, there's a lot of different pressures that exist. Again, speaking from the demand side, a lot of these sorts of things push people to seek comfort in other ways, right? The sort of things that drive people towards drug use, towards crime, towards, issues with social cohesion as well. So extremism and radicalization, things like that as well. How do we animate a pressured community, a pressured nation towards engaging in that whole of nation response when they might be fatigued from a lot of other different pressures that are bearing down on them day to day?
James, I wish I had the answer to that question. We probably that is a big one. I mean, the way you've characterized the dilemma and the vibe for young people these days is so familiar to me. I've got young adult children as well. It is overwhelming. There isn't a lot of good news all the time, and I think the internet and social media make sure that's the case as well, and really feeds and fuels it. I think it was Mike's remarks recently where he said, the internet is the incubator and social media is the accelerator. I'd say social media has a hell of a lot to answer for in terms of the damage it's done to young people and to our society. There's a lot of great things about it, but I also think that the doom scrolling and the bad news that people get fed contributes to that overall feeling of malaise. I don't know what the answer is to that problem. I think it will come down to, how perhaps we wean society off this constant feed, how we start better connecting and rebuilding community and social cohesion. I mean, these sound like motherhood statements, but this is what it feels like we've lost. We are more divided, we are more conflicted than perhaps we have been in the past. And this is occurring at a time where we have this, these multiple threads of threat that we're dealing with, not just locally, but in our geostrategic environment, greater instability, less certainty. So I think all of these, cause us to feel, more depressed or more less hopeful about the future. And I wish I had the answer, to it. I don't think it's hiding under the rock or ignoring the threats or the problems or not talking about it. I do think calling it out and talking about the things that we should be concerned about so that people can at least make some active decisions or some deliberate decisions about what they're going to do about it. I think we have to continue to do that. I think part of the problem, though, is that we're moving very quickly in the direction where there isn't a source of truth, that we can all adhere to, and people are finding their own source of truth, wherever they want to. So I think that adds to the challenge of trying to build cohesion or to build more of a, national momentum towards a more hopeful, resilient, country and community. So, I mean, you've just depressed me. I thought my speech was depressing, but now I feel demoralized for all the young people in the room, But I think it's a valid observation and a valid way to feel, and that doesn't help, I know, but all is not lost. There is a lot of good out there. Just get off social media and start, getting out in the sunshine and enjoying it a little bit more.
Look, I'm very appreciative. I mean, I really appreciate that question, James. That it is a very profound question, but also I'm also grateful, Heather, that you've not only put this in terms of your core mission, but in terms of, I guess, the larger national challenge. And that's some of the work we're trying to engage with at the college at the moment in our community consultations, and without sort of giving away the punchline, because we are working through our data on that at the moment. That's our report for next year. Is I guess that question of confidence, and I think it's in a way what we're hearing from different parts of the community is sort of a recognition that you realistically you can't be optimistic all of the time. In fact, a lot of the time you can't be optimistic, but a focus on the negative and on what divides us is also is deeply counterproductive. But I think that realistic sense of confidence and engagement with risk is the sort of message that we're hearing of it. And, there is an appetite we're finding for a national conversation. So watch that space, hopefully sooner rather than later. Look, we're moving close to time here, and I'm really grateful not only for sharing your own insights with us this evening, Heather, but also for your leadership of the institution or the institutions, and really appreciative, I know, to all of your team who've contributed to these very valuable documents that contribute so much to the national interest as well. So I want to also note that we're appreciative not only to you, but all of your team and to colleagues, both from the college and from your organisations who set up this evening's event.